Kids will be kids, or will they? You have heard that phrase before. Maybe someone said it to dismiss what happened to you in high school. Maybe you have even said it to yourself, trying to minimize experiences that still wake you up at night. But what if I told you that the bullying you experienced as a teenager didn't just hurt you then? It rewired your brain. That the professional adult who has panic attacks before difficult conversations, the accomplished parent who crumbles at unfair criticism, the successful person who withdraws completely when misunderstood. Their responses aren't weakness, they are evidence. Evidence of wounds that never properly healed. See, this isn't a rare problem. Millions of adults are walking around carrying teenage trauma that they have never been taught to recognize or heal. They blame themselves for being too sensitive or overreacting to present day conflicts, not understanding that their nervous system is responding to ghosts. Over the course of this talk, we are going to explore something that psychology is only beginning to fully understand: how teenage bullying creates lasting neurological changes, why those changes persist into adulthood, and most importantly, how you can finally heal from wounds you may have carried for decades. If you have ever wondered why certain types of conflict hit you like a freight train, why unfair judgment feels like it might actually kill you, or why you can't seem to just get over things that happened years ago, this video is for you. But first, we need to understand what teenage bullying actually does to the developing brain. And trust me, it's more serious than anyone told you. Let's start with a question. Why do some adults seem bulletproof when criticized, while others, equally successful, equally intelligent, fall apart completely? The answer often lies not in their current circumstances, but in what happened to them between the ages of 12 and 18. See, during adolescence, your brain is essentially under construction. The prefrontal cortex, the part that handles emotional regulation and rational thinking, won't be fully developed until your mid-20s. Meanwhile, the limbic system, your brain's alarm center, is hyperactive. This creates a perfect storm. Maximum emotional intensity with minimum ability to process and integrate difficult experiences. What does bullying actually destroy? Teenage bullying doesn't just cause temporary pain. It systematically destroys three fundamental assumptions. One is the assumption that social spaces are safe. When you are humiliated in front of peers, your brain learns that visibility equals vulnerability. Two, it destroys the assumption that others will see you fairly. When you are judged harshly for things beyond your control, your brain learns that people cannot be trusted to evaluate you accurately. Third, it destroys the assumption that your authentic self is worthy of respect. When you are attacked for being who you are, your brain learns that something is fundamentally wrong with you. But the body remembers. Here's what is important to understand. These lessons don't just live in your thoughts, they embed in your nervous system. Our brain creates neural pathways that say social conflict equals mortal danger. Our body learns to flood with stress hormones at the first sign of interpersonal tension. 20 years later, when a coworker criticizes your presentation, you are not just responding to their words. We are responding to the accumulated helplessness of every time We were humiliated and had no way to defend ourselves. This is why adult survivors of teenage bullying often feel like they are overreacting to present day situations. But they are not overreacting. They are having a completely normal trauma response. And until we understand that, healing remains impossible. If someone breaks their leg, we don't tell them to walk it off. If someone has surgery, we don't expect them back at work the next day. But if someone was psychologically terrorized during their most vulnerable development years, we tell them to get over it. This is the paradox of invisible wounds. Society has gotten better at recognizing bullying's immediate effects. We know it leads to teen depression, anxiety, even suicide. But we have completely failed to understand how these experiences cast shadows across entire adult lives. The lawyer who is brilliant in court but has panic attacks before confronting their teenage daughter about curfew is an example of this. The teacher who can manage 30 kids but falls apart when one parent sends an angry email is another example. The CEO who can negotiate $1 million deals but becomes mentally ill when someone questions their character. These aren't character flaws, they are trauma responses. What is the secondary wound here? Which makes it worse. When you react strongly to present day conflicts, people often respond with the same dismissiveness you experienced as a teenager. Why are you being so dramatic? It is not that serious. Let it go. You need thicker skin. This invalidation becomes the secondary wound. You are not just dealing with the original trauma. You are dealing with a world that consistently tells you that your pain is not legitimate. So we internalize. We start believing these things. We tell ourselves we are just weak, oversensitive, broken. We learn to hide our responses, to minimize our experiences, to gaslight ourselves before anyone else can. But what if I told you that these experiences aren't evidence of weakness? They are evidence of a normal nervous system responding to unhealed trauma. Understanding this distinction is the first step toward healing. Because once we stop fighting our reactions and start understanding them, everything changes. The most insidious thing about bullying isn't the immediate pain. It is how the bully's voices become our inner voice. Their assessment of who we are become our assessment of who we are. But here is something powerful. Those voices were never telling the truths about us. Yet, we carry the lie. Bullies don't attack our weaknesses. They attack our differences, our creativity, our sensitivity, our intelligence, our authenticity. The very things that make us unique become targets. Over time, we'll learn to see these qualities as liabilities rather than gifts. How then do we separate story from shame? Healing begins with a radical Recognition that everything they said about us was projection, strategy, or pure cruelty. None of it was accurate assessment. The weird kid who loved books too much. You weren't too weird. You were intellectually curious in an anti intellectual environment. The sensitive kid who cried too easily. You weren't too weak. You were emotionally intelligent in an emotionally stunted environment. The different kid wouldn't fit in. You weren't defective. You were authentic in an environment that rewarded conformity. Right now, I want us to think about the main thing we were bullied for. Maybe it was how we looked, how we talked, what we were interested in, how we dressed. Now ask, was that actually a flaw? Or was that bully attacking what made us different? And if it made us different, is difference actually bad? Your story isn't I was bullied because something was wrong with me. Your story is I was bullied because people felt threatened by my authenticity, my intelligence, my creativity, my uniqueness, my sensitivity, and they tried to make me ashamed of my gifts. One of the most healing things we can do is write our story, not sanitize for others' comfort, but raw and true. Name what happened. Name how it affected you. Name the lies you have carried about yourself. Every time you refuse to minimize your experience to make others comfortable, you reclaim a piece of your voice. Every time you name a lie you've believed about yourself, you weaken its power over you. But reclaiming your narrative is just the beginning. Our trauma lives not just in our thoughts, but in our body. And that's where the real healing work begins. See, we can understand our trauma intellectually for years and still have our body betray us the moment someone raises their voice. That's because trauma doesn't just live in our minds, it lives in our nervous system. And cognitive understanding alone cannot heal what's stored in our body. Because the body keeps the score. When you were bullied, your body learned specific patterns. Chest tightening when laughed at, stomach dropping when excluded, muscles freezing when confronted. These aren't conscious responses, they are neurological programs written by repeated trauma. Your adult brain might know you are safe, but your body still runs 15-year-old software. How then do we recognize activation? The first step is learning to recognize when we are activated. Notice, does your breathing become shallow? Do your shoulders rise toward your ears? Does your heart race? Do you feel disconnected from your body? Does your voice change or disappear entirely? These are your trauma signatures. Our body's way of saying danger detected. Healing trauma requires body-based approaches. Breath work, which is using your breath as a bridge between your conscious and unconscious mind. When you're activated, slow, deep breathing literally tells your nervous system that you're safe. Movements. Trauma gets stuck in the body. Yoga, dance, even vigorous walking can help release stored tension and reset your nervous system. Grounding techniques such as feeling your feet on the floor, naming 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear. This brings us back to present reality instead of past trauma. Professional therapy, EMDR, somatic experiencing, trauma-focused therapy, Our approaches that also work directly with our nervous system to heal trauma at its source. The goal is not invulnerability. We are not trying to make We're not trying to become bulletproof. We are trying to help our nervous system distinguish between actual threats and trauma echoes. When someone criticizes us unfairly, the goal is to think this person is having a bad day instead of I am about to be destroyed. The next time you feel activated, try this. Place one hand on your chest, one on your belly. Breathe so that only the bottom hand moves. Say to yourself, I'm safe right now. This feeling will pass. I am an adult with choices and power. As your nervous system begins to heal, you can start building something you may never have had. Healthy boundaries. One of the cruelest lessons of teenage bullying is that boundaries don't exist. Bullies invaded your space, distorted your reputation, ignored your protests, and the adults around you either didn't see it or told you to handle it yourself. You learned that you were essentially undefended. But here is one thing no one told you then, and what we need to know now. We have the right to protect ourselves. We always did. So, what are boundaries in this context? Boundaries aren't walls, they are property lines. They don't keep people out, they let people know how to treat us well. When someone crosses a boundary, it is not an attack on them, it is information for them. It is not an attack on us, it is information for us. So, what are some boundary violations that bully survivors have to know? One, people who consistently misrepresent what we say. People who mock our interests or passions. People who make jokes at our expense. People who ignore our no. People who punish us for having feelings. People who demand explanations for our choices. What are some skills we never learned? Most people learn boundary setting gradually through childhood. But bullying survivors often miss this education. Instead, we learn to over-explain our decisions, apologize for having needs, accept treatment that makes us uncomfortable, believe that setting boundaries makes us mean or difficult. Here are some phrases that can change our life. That is not true, and I won't discuss it further, is one. Another is, I need to think about that before I respond. Another is, that does not work for me. Another is, I am not comfortable with that joke. Another is, I have made my decision. Best is, no justifications, no elaborate explanations, just clear, simple statements. But then, we can't deny that we sometimes fear boundaries. We may be like, if I set boundaries, people will reject me. And yes, we are right. Some people will. The people who have been benefiting from our lack of boundaries won't like the change. But here is the thing, those were not healthy relationships anyway. They were relationships based on our compliance, not our authentic self. So we can start small, begin with low-stakes situation, practice saying no to small requests without lengthy explanations. Notice how often we apologize unnecessarily. Pay attention to when we feel compelled to justify normal choices. Each boundary you hold is a message to both yourself and others, saying, I am no longer an undefended target. But as important as boundaries are, they are just one part of a larger process, learning to trust your own perception again. One of the most confusing aspects of bullying trauma is how it affects our ability to read situations accurately. When we have been repeatedly gaslit and manipulated, we start to doubt our own perceptions. Every criticism feels like character assassination. Every misunderstanding feels like deliberate cruelty. Our trauma response gets triggered by situations that don't warrant it. One, we lose our discernment. Chronic bullying teaches us that social interactions are fundamentally dangerous. Our brain develops a hair trigger response, better to assume threats than to be caught off guard. The problem is, this hypersensitivity means we cannot distinguish between actual attacks and everyday interpersonal friction. So, how do we rebuild our radar? Healing involves recalibrating our threat detection system. Here are some questions that can help. 1. Intent versus impact. Did this person intend to hurt me, or are they just communicating poorly? 2. Pattern versus incident. Is this part of a consistent pattern of disrespect or an isolated moment? 3. Personal versus situational. Is this about me, or are they stressed about something else? 4. Projection versus reflection. Is your criticism revealing something about them or something about me? Let's consider these examples. Your boss gives harsh feedback on a project. The trauma response is, they hate me. I'm going to get fired. I'm terrible at my job. But the discerning response says, they are stressed about the deadline. This is about the work, not just about me personally. Second scenario, a friend does not text you back for 2 days. The trauma response says, they are mad at me. I did something wrong. The friendship is over. A discerning response says, they are probably busy. If something were wrong, they'll tell me directly. We can also use the both and approach. Sometimes your trauma response is accurate. Some people are manipulative. Some situations are genuinely threatening. The goal isn't to ignore red flags. It is to distinguish between actual red flags and trauma echoes. You can validate your feelings while questioning your interpretations. One of the best investments you can make is in therapy or support groups where you can reality test your perceptions with neutral parties. Sometimes you need external validation that yes, that treatment was unacceptable. Other times, you need gentle perspective that you might be reading threats where none exists. This process of rebuilding discernment is deeply connected to another crucial aspect of healing, finding your tribe. See, isolation wasn't just a side effect of your bullying experience. It was both a weapon and a wound. Bullies deliberately isolated you from potential allies, and that isolation made their version of reality feel like the only reality. Healing requires breaking that isolation, but not just with anyone, with the right people. There's a crucial difference between people who support you and people who witness you. Supporters offer encouragement. You're amazing. Don't let them get to you. Witnesses offer something deeper. I see what happened to you. I believe your experience. Your pain makes sense. Supporters want to cheer you up. Witnesses want to see you clearly. So, why do witnesses matter? Well, when someone truly witnesses your experience, several things happen. Your reality gets validated. You are not crazy, oversensitive, or making things up. Your shame gets interrupted. Someone else can hold the truth of what happened. Your isolation gets broken. You are no longer alone with your story. Your voice gets strengthened. Every time someone believes you, you believe yourself more. So, where do we find witnesses? One, therapists trained in trauma, especially those who understand bullying's long term effects. Two, support groups for adult survivors of bullying or childhood trauma. Three, online communities where people share similar experiences. Four, friends who have done their own healing work and can hold space without trying to fix you. Five, books, podcasts, and videos by people who understand your experience. However, there are red flags and potential witnesses as well. So avoid people who try to rush you toward forgiveness, who try to minimize your experience. It wasn't that bad. Let it go. Kids were just being kids. People who make it about themselves. Oh, that happened to me too. But I got over it. People who offer surface level solutions and say things like, just think positive. Get uncomfortable with your pain and try to change the subject. Some people, yeah, they get uncomfortable with your pain and try to change the subject. As you find true witnesses for your experience, something beautiful happens. You become able to witness others. Your capacity to see, validate, and hold space for people's pain grows exponentially. Because this isn't just healing for you, it is healing for the collective wound of all the people who were hurt and never had their experience witnessed. With witnesses in place, we can address one of the most misguided pieces of advice given to trauma survivors, which is the pressure to forgive. You need to forgive them. Forgiveness will set you free. Holding on to anger only hurts you. Really? If you're a survivor of bullying, you have probably heard these phrases more times than you can count. And maybe you have tried to forgive. Maybe you have forced yourself to let go of anger that felt completely justified. But what if I told you that premature forgiveness might actually be preventing your healing? See, our culture has created a mythology around forgiveness that is both spiritually toxic and psychologically harmful. We have been told that forgiveness is required for healing, a sign of spiritual maturity, the opposite of victimhood, something you owe to others. None of this is true. Because premature forgiveness hurts. When you rush toward forgiveness before you have fully processed your anger and grief, several things happen. You bypass necessary emotions that contain important information. You minimize your experience to make forgiveness feel possible. You prioritize others' comfort over your own healing. You reinforce the belief that your pain does not matter. And that, sweetheart, is how the bullied becomes the bully. Only you are now bullying yourself. Your anger is not a character flaw. It is a guardian emotion. It says, what happened to you was wrong. You deserved better treatment. Your boundaries were violated. You have the right to protect yourself. Anger teaches us to recognize red flags. It motivates us to set boundaries. It fuels our commitment to creating a different life. These are gifts, not problems. So, what does real forgiveness look like? Authentic forgiveness, if it comes at all, is not a decision you make. It is a natural outcome of complete healing. It happens when you have finally fully processed your pain, you have reclaimed your power, you have built a life so rich that your opinion becomes irrelevant. You have integrated the experience into a larger story of growth. When this happens, forgiveness is not something you force. It is something that emerges organically. What then is the path to freedom? Well, true freedom does not come from absolving those who hurt you. It comes from refusing to let their actions continue directing your life. From making choices based on present reality rather than past wounds. From building relationships with people who see and value your authentic self. From using your experience to help others who are struggling. Some survivors never reach forgiveness, and that is equally valid. What matters is not whether you forgive, but whether you are free, whether you are healed. Can you think about them without being flooded with emotion? Can you live your life without their voices in your head? Can you trust your own perceptions and worth? Can you form healthy relationships despite what they did? If yes, then you are free, regardless of whether you have forgiven. Instead of asking, how can I forgive them? Try asking, how can I free myself from their influence? What would my life look like if their opinion did not matter? How can I honor my experience while not letting it define me? This brings us to the most beautiful part of the healing journey: how survivors can transform their wounds into wisdom. There is something remarkable that happens when bullying survivors complete their healing journey. They don't just recover from their trauma, They transform it into something powerful. They become some of the most compassionate, insightful, and authentically courageous people you will ever meet. Your bullying experience, as painful as it was, developed capacities in you that others might never possess. One is exquisite empathy. Having experienced deliberate cruelty, you can detect others' pain with radar like precision. Two, bullshit detection. Having been manipulated and gaslit, you can spot authenticity and manipulation from miles away. Three, courage in authenticity. Having been punished for being yourself, you eventually learn the fierce courage of radical authenticity. 4. Advocacy skills. Having been silenced, you become a powerful voice for others who can't speak for themselves. 5. Resilience. Having survived psychological warfare, you develop an unshakable inner strength. This transformation does not happen automatically. At some point in your healing journey, you reach a choice point. Will you use your experience to become bitter and closed, or will you use it to become wise and compassionate? Will you let your bully's cruelty teach you to be cruel, or will you let your own pain teach you to be gentle with others' pain? Here are some examples of transformation. The former victim who becomes a therapist specializing in trauma. The survivor who creates spaces for other marginalized people. The once silenced teenager who becomes a powerful advocate for justice. The person who was made to feel worthless, who dedicates their life to helping others recognize their worth. Every survivor has something unique to offer the world. What I call your medicine. It is a specific wisdom that can only come from walking your particular path of suffering and healing. Maybe your medicine is creating art that gives voice to the voiceless, building communities where authenticity is celebrated, mentoring young people who remind you of a younger self, or simply living so authentically that you give others permission to do the same. When you heal your bullying trauma, you don't just heal yourself, you heal everyone around you. You break cycles of hurts that might have continued for generations. You model for others that transformation is possible. Your children won't carry your unhealed trauma. Your friendships will be based on authenticity rather than people pleasing. Your work in the world will come from wholeness rather than wounds. The bullies who tried to convince you that you were worthless, weird, or broken had no idea they were forging someone who would eventually become one, more compassionate than they could imagine, more authentic than they dared to be, more powerful than they ever were, more loved than they ever taught you to believe you could be. This brings us to our final discussion: what it means to live as both survivor and thriver. Healing from bullying trauma does not mean pretending it never happened. It does not mean becoming someone who never gets hurt or never feels triggered. It means integrating your experience into a larger story, one where you are both survivor and thriver, wounded and wise, vulnerable and powerful. You can be healed and still have hard days. You can be strong and still need support sometimes. You can be confident and still feel insecure occasionally. You can be successful and still carry some scars. You can be powerful and still remember what powerlessness felt like. This is not failure, it is humanity. So, what does thriving look like? Thriving looks like authentic relationships. You attract people who love you for who you really are, not who you think you should be. Thriving looks like appropriate responses. When you are treated poorly, you feel appropriately upset but not devastated. You can distinguish between someone having a bad day and someone being genuinely cruel. Thriving looks like self advocacy. You can speak up for yourself without apology. You can set boundaries without guilt and leave situations that don't serve you. Thriving looks like emotional regulation. When you get triggered, you have tools to calm your nervous system and respond from your adult self rather than from your wounded teenager. Thriving looks like purpose from pain. You use your experience to help others, create positive change, or simply live with more compassion and wisdom. Healing is not a destination, it is a practice. Some days you feel powerful and free. Other days, something will happen that reminds you exactly why you needed to heal in the first place. Both experiences are valid, both are part of the journey. But every single day, you have opportunities to choose healing over hiding by speaking honestly instead of saying what you think people want to hear, by setting a boundary instead of overgiving, by trusting your perception instead of doubting yourself, by choosing self compassion instead of self criticism, by staying present instead of dissociating from difficult emotions. These may seem like small things, but they are actually revolutionary acts. By doing this healing work, you are not just changing your own life, you are changing the world. Every time you choose authenticity over people pleasing, you give others permission to do the same. Every time you speak truth about your experience, you help someone else feel less alone. You are becoming living proof that bullies don't get the last word, survivors do. Most times, when they heal. Your healing journey is just beginning, and it's gonna be challenging. There will be days when you wonder if it's worth it, if you'll ever feel truly free, if the pain will ever truly fully transform into wisdom. I'm here to tell you it is worth it. You will feel free, and your pain, as much as it has cost you, will become medicine for yourself and for others. The teenager who once felt so alone and powerless has grown into someone capable of protecting not just themselves, but others who face similar struggles. Your voice, once silenced, now carries the authority of someone who has walked through fire and emerged transformed. We are not defined by what was done to us in those formative years. We are defined by what we have chosen to do with the strength it took to survive them. And that strength, tested by cruelty, refined by suffering, and ultimately wielded with wisdom, is ours to keep forever. Over the course of this video, we have explored how teenage bullying creates lasting neurological changes, why adult responses to conflict often trace back to adolescent trauma, the specific steps needed to heal, reclaim narrative, rewire the nervous system, build boundaries, develop discernment, find witnesses, move beyond premature forgiveness, and transform wounds into wisdom. If you have recognized yourself in this, I want you to know your responses are not overreactions, they are trauma responses. Your pain is valid regardless of how long it happened. Healing is possible no matter how long you have been struggling. You deserve relationships where you are valued for your authentic self.